My next question is for you, Captain. Now, the New Delhi Declaration has been quite a diplomatic victory for New Delhi. And like you mentioned, New Delhi has arrived on the global stage. But I'm sure it was not easy to get Russia and China on the same very table. How did New Delhi manage to do that?
I think it's been a triumph of diplomacy, actually. To be very honest, I was not very optimistic that we'll be able to come up with a declaration. And I think that shows the persuasive skills and India's ability to pull diverse parties together. The manner in which we could persuade the Western countries to agree to this declaration where Russia has not been mentioned by name itself is a big coup, because there was a time when the Western world wanted that not only Russia should be named, but they even wanted that Ukrainian president should be invited to address the G20 Summit. So I think we have really managed, and I think the Western world also realized that it is in their interest to ensure that India succeeds. And it is in their interest that this G20 Summit is a successful summit. And I think to that extent, we have really pulled it off. And I'm sure most analysts across the globe would have been extremely skeptical that there would be a declaration.
Absolutely, Captain. Stay with us as we also see how the African Union was inducted into the G20 Summit. Meanwhile, India's move of including the African Union as a member of G20 in June this year has paid off. The grouping that represents 55 countries has been admitted as a new member of the G20. Before the first day of the G20 Summit began in the Indian national capital, New Delhi, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced that the African Union has been made the permanent member of the G20. Take a listen.
सबका साथ की भावना से ही भारत ने प्रस्ताव रखा था कि अफ्रीकन यूनियन को G20 की स्थायी सदस्यता दी जाए। मेरा विश्वास है कि इस प्रस्ताव पर हम सबकी सहमति है।
Now, G20, comprising of the world's richest and most powerful countries, the African Union now has the same status as the European Union, the only regional bloc with a full membership. The idea for the African Union to become a member of the bloc was floated in June this year. That is when the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi wrote to G20 leaders to propose that the African Union should be given full membership at the upcoming summit here in New Delhi. The proposal was also backed by the key members like EU, China and Russia. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has made giving voice to the Global South a centerpiece of this year's summit, and adding that the African Union at the outset was a strong step in that very direction. Moreover, with this very decision, the G20 president, India, has made its priorities clear. G20 needs to be an inclusive platform. Well, to talk more on this, I am now being joined by Professor Iraqi. He's an associate professor at the University of Nairobi's Faculty of Business and Management Sciences. Welcome to the show, Professor.
How are you?
Right. Now, Professor, the G20 has now become G21, if I may say so. The African Union is now a permanent member of the G20. How do you see African Union's inclusion to the global table?
That was the best gift that G20 could give to the African continent, because by being a member of G20 or G21, as we put it, Africa is now at par with the rest of the world, with the rest of industrialized countries. So Africa now has a voice to articulate her dreams and aspirations to the rest of the world. So I think that was a big honor to Africa, but must go beyond joining G20 or G21. It should make Africans take up proposals, take up projects that are going to enhance the living standards of African people. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about joining G20, but improving the living standards of African people in the 55 African countries. Good move, but wait for the results.
Right, Professor. My next question is to you, Captain. With the African Union now becoming a part of G20, how do you assess India's inclusivity agenda at the G20 summit this year?
See, by getting African Union and taking up the issues that affect the global South, I think India's approach for inclusion has moved a way forward. In fact, Prime Minister Modi in his in his article wrote very clearly that G20 needs to move to human-centric approach from GDP-centric. And I think to that extent, bringing African Union has made G20 more egalitarian, more representative, because now you have 55 African countries who are amongst the poorest in the world. So it was not a exclusive cup of rich countries, but we also have people who have come from the have-nots. And I think large number of issues that the poorer countries of the world face have been raised by Prime Minister Modi this time, because what we have seen is that after COVID, it was the poorer countries of the world which suffered more, and then subsequently Russia-Ukraine war derailed the food supplies to these countries, and their countries, their populations suffered. In fact, they faced hunger, they faced shortage of energy. And I think a lot of these issues have been included in declaration where we said that food supply chains, etc., needs to be ensured. And I think by now inclusion into G20, these countries would be able to raise their voice and ask the developed countries to ameliorate their suffering directly.
Absolutely, Captain. Professor Rakhi, coming to you, I want to ask the same question to you. How do you assess the message of inclusivity under India's presidency now that the African Union is also a part of the G20 Summit?
This has been a very contentious issue in Africa. Africa is always seen as on the fringe, that people go and discuss something, whether it is G20, whether it is UN. We always feel that people discuss African issues. Once they have agreed, they come to us. But by now sitting on the same table with industrial countries or very industrialized countries, we can talk to our brothers and our sisters. We can talk directly to each other. Remember that in Africa, despite the internet, despite everything else, we like talking to each other. So I think by bringing us to the same table with these industrialized countries, we feel included. We can articulate our issues. We can share our problems. And I'm sure that by being a member of that group, it's going to be easier to articulate our issues, and we shall be heard. So I think I must thank the host of G20 for including African Union. It's a clear indication that they all see the potential of Africa, not just as a market, but a significant contributor to the global economic agenda. So we have a lot of farmlands, we have a lot of minerals, we have a lot of other resources that the world can benefit from, as we also benefit. So I think there's a good move, but the most important thing is how Africans themselves are going to take this. Are they going to do their part? As I said, that is not enough to join a group, but you also must do your part. The same way, if you marry and become part of a family, the wife, the children, everyone must do his part to see the results. So we are waiting.
Right, Professor. My last question to you, Captain. We've been speaking about the inclusivity agenda and a lot of major deals that have been inked. But apart from the diplomatic talks, India's soft power is also at display. Talk to us more on that.
See, there is no doubt that India's soft power in last few years has actually spread far and wide. And in this particular summit, the full focus has been on soft power. If you saw Prime Minister Modi receiving dignitaries at the backdrop of Konark Wheel, then at Rajghat taking them to the Mahatma Gandhi's Samadhi and showing Mahatma Gandhi's humble abode, Sabarmati Ashram, and his backdrop. I was just seeing an interview by Brazilian president where the interviewer asked him that you seem to be seeing films, Indian films, and he talked about RRR. Now that shows, I think today Indian cuisine, Indian films, and above all yoga and spirituality from India has spread far and wide. And this creates a benign image of India, unlike China, which is seen as a usurper or maybe with certain amount of apprehension. India is perceived by the global community as a benign power, and I think a great deal of credit for that goes to Indian democracy. Being democratic, we are transparent, people have confidence in us because they know there's nothing opaque. Now, in China's case, you had President Xi Jinping not coming for this conference, which to my mind was a big blow for him, not for India, because China has lost out by Xi Jinping not attending. Prime Minister was nowhere there. Prime Minister Li Qiang was not covered by any media, there was hardly any coverage. If Xi Jinping would have been there, he would have been one of the prime persons being covered, probably as much as President Biden or even more, considering the delicate relationship between India and China. But nobody knows why he didn't come, whether it's his health issue or there's an internal turbulence.
Right.
That is the problem of an autocratic regime. And as a result, the global community perceives them with certain amount of apprehensions because you don't know what is brewing inside. But India, because of its democratic credentials and history of Vasudev Kutumbakam, where we actually believe that whole world has to be taken with us, I think there is a nature of benign, India's benign nature is appreciated by the globe. And I think that is where India's soft power, and I think two important tools of India's soft power have been yoga and of course Bollywood. And I think yoga and spirituality as well as Bollywood have really transcended globe, including even those barriers which we generally feel. Even in China, if you go, you will see that spirituality and Bollywood have made a deep inroads inside Chinese society.
Absolutely, Captain. Thank you so much for being with us here today. I would also like to thank Professor Rakhi for joining us and sharing your insights with us on this topic.